This is the ZMAR Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch ZMAR.
Welcome back to the ZMAR Podcast. Today I have in studio Danny Edison from the South Side of Chicago. He is a inspiration youth hockey. He grew up playing hockey, played a high level, and definitely been around the world of hockey for a long time. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Can you give our audience a little background on the hockey world growing up in the South Side?
Sure. So just from a hockey perspective, kind of.
Sure.
Well, where do we start? I started playing late, 6 years old. So in the world of hockey, it's a little late. My dad was a Chicago policeman. He's a cop. We grew up on the South Side here in Beverly. I think his partner, I still remember Roy Dioper was his partner. He had two kids who I'm still buddies with as a result of, hockey growing up together. That's kind of the coolest thing about hockey is the network that you keep. But he took me out to St. Spectrum, the old St. Spectrum, and I hated it and I didn't want to go out there. And finally, probably the last 15 minutes I went out there, I went on the ice, and it wasn't as scary as I thought it was. And that was kind of all she wrote. Played at the Chicago Jets for a couple of years, and then I remember my first season. It's crazy, the memories, like how clear some of the things are, and then things that happen later in life. Like, oh my God, I can't remember any of that. It was 1,000 years ago. But I remember the first hockey team coming away from the games, being thrilled if I actually touched the puck. I was so bad just jumping in with a bunch of kids who had been doing it for a while. I was stuck out. They played me on defense, and if I touched the puck, it was a big deal. So the next season, just one season later, things started coming along, and then the 2 seasons after that, this is where things started to get a little bananas. Somebody informed my dad that the best hockey team is in Glenview for Mite Double A. So we're still talking 8 years old. And now my dad's driving me an hour each way from Beverly to Glenview 3, 4, 5 times a week to play for legend, the Yoda of Chicagoland hockey, Wally Cormilo, who actually passed away 2 days ago. He retired a week ago from the Deerfield Falcons. Wow. He's in his 90s, and he was the Yoda. So every year, his team would win the state championship. And I remember I went to play up there. So then from there, we stayed there for 4 years, 4 state championships, and then to Team Illinois. Came back to the South Side as we started to get a little bit older. Back then, there was only 2 AAA hockey clubs. It was the Young Americans and Team Illinois. Young Americans' home rink was Lake Forest, a little far from Beverly. TI was in Franklin Park. So all these South Side kids who were pretty good at hockey, because we had some really good coaching down here on the South Side, were making these hour-long treks each way. And as you get older, you start to find other interests. And you're like, maybe there's other things that I could also be doing with my time. So we came back. We all the kids got together. Like, hey, we can make our own team down here. We didn't have a AAA club to play with, but we came back to the Hawks for a couple of years, and then St. Jude. And it was just such a good group that we would go up there and play the Young Americans and beat them, and play Team Illinois and beat them. And fast forward all the way through, like last year of midgets, we went to Silver Sticks and Sarnia at AAA and won the whole darn thing against your Little Caesars and your London Sabres, and we were all double rostered. There's so many things that I feel like used to be done the right way that are no longer that way. Which includes double rostering, so we'd have all these kids playing, we'd have a bunch of kids at Marist and a bunch of kids at Carmel and a bunch of kids at Lawrence and a bunch of kids at Rita. And we'd all come together for, say, our St. Jude midget team, and you got red helmets and you got chipped brown paint helmets and you got black helmets and blue helmets. But we were all double rostered, and we'd go ahead and win the state championship in club, and went to nationals twice, but then all fall back and beat the snot out of each other in the Catholic League, and nobody was worse the wear. It's just how it should be done now, and it's a shame that all these coaches are so greedy and selfish, that they're saying, well, you play for me, you can't be on another roster. That's ridiculous. That should be a kid's call, not a coach's call.
Sure, and it increased the amount of ice time, didn't it?
Oh, my God. Yeah, and there weren't conflicts. We all knew up front. Listen, if there's a conflict, you're going to your high school. If Fenwick's playing Rita tonight, and we're playing the Northwest Chargers, we're not going to have any Fenwick or Rita kids. We know that. But, if you put together the right group of players, you go in with 8. It's the right 8, and we didn't have any practices, very few. But it was those are some of the best days, the club hockey, the caliber wise, right? It was very similar. It's kind of a shame that what's happened to all of that.
Do you think that's changed some of the outcome of hockey players advancing even to the college level? Quality or just the number of players getting to that level?
No, I still think there's no one way to do it. There's no right way to get there. There's no wrong way to get there. And technology has enabled that so much that nobody's slipping through the cracks. 20, 30 years ago, there's kids slipping through the cracks all over the place, right? Like to be a scout, first of all, the word scout rubs me the wrong way.
Sure.
Nobody's scouting the age groups of our boys right now. Nobody is scouting them, despite all of the BS.
But some of the parents think that.
Oh, a lot of the parents think that and you can't blame them because they're being told that. They're being told that by hockey directors and hockey coaches, Hey, listen, you come play here and, we're going to make sure that you get out of here. If a kid's good enough, they're going to find him, period. I don't care if he's even at AAA, like playing AAA for squirts and peewees and bantams. Here's the upside. The upside is you're going to be getting good coaching. You're going to be playing with better players. And you're going to be playing better competition. But the reality is the best AAA midget hockey players, which is when it becomes meaningful, and Bantam really, but at 14, 15, if that kid was playing AA at age 13, if he's good enough, they're going to find him. There's nobody slipping through the cracks anymore. So there's no correct route to go. If you're good enough to go play Junior A, and that's kind of the first the first goal, just get into Junior A, real Junior A, USHL, maybe even NAHL. If you're good enough to get there, you can go through high school. There's loads of examples. You could also go through club. It doesn't really matter. Where are you getting the best coaching? That's the question. And then, competition is 1B, those are the things that matter.
Sure. And now, throughout your youth hockey career, so to speak, you end up playing at Mount Carmel, Southside School.
Mount Carmel High School, back when Mount Carmel was really good. It's kind of fallen off a little bit.
Hey, but that's okay. Well, alumni, you got pride there, and
they're coming back too. They're bouncing back. They've got an old teammate of mine, man in the ship, and Digger knows what he's doing. And they had a rough year last year, and they're already bouncing back. So they got some real nice young talent, and I'm rooting for the entire Catholic League to bounce back because the Catholic League used to be very much at the top of Illinois State high school hockey, and it's kind of slipped, over the past 20 years, maybe even less than that. But
is that because there was a big push towards AAA in the Chicagoland area and an expansion of clubs?
That's probably a factor. Yeah, everything's so watered down right now. Think about what I said a few minutes ago that there used to be 2 AAA teams. And they didn't always field that second team. For example, all of my years, squirts, peewees, bantams, midgets, there was always, for each one of those years, there was a CYA team. But out of all those years, I think TI only fielded a team maybe 2 or 3 of those years. So now you're kind of talking about 1 AAA team, right? So that's only got how many roster spots. Therefore, how many AA players in the state of Illinois are good enough to be playing AAA? It was a ton. There was a lot. Now it's flipped. Now, how many kids with 5 AAA teams, how many kids on those rosters aren't really AAA players, right? They're not really AAA players. And as a result of that, you're plucking them out of AA hockey. So now the trickle-down effect starts, right? So now your best... the kids who should be playing AA hockey are gone. So now the AA players are kind of scooting up. And then you got the Central States versus the Nihil and the different leagues. How in the hell do you have a kid who is, let's just say, 12 years old? 12 years old. And he's playing in this league over here. And he's literally not playing against the other best 12-year-old hockey players in the state of Illinois because he's not in their league. They don't play against each other. So you're not even exposing him to where's the bar. Like back in the day, everybody who's 12 years old knows everybody in the state who's 12 years old. And the really good hockey players, like, okay, that's the bar. I'm playing against this kid who's the best, and I need to, get up to that. And you're very much aware of where the bar is. Now you can have kids, they don't even see each other. They're not even aware of where the bar is because now you're stuck in your little bubble. So I know what the bar is in my bubble, but I don't know anything about, it makes zero sense. And it's all, if you ask me, goes back to when adults figured out how to make money out of youth hockey. Mm-hmm. And they've just been blowing it up ever since.
And parents are willing to spend it.
Number one, they're willing to spend it, because we're got to spend money to get Johnny to the show. But the real evil, they're almost victims, right? Because you expect a kid to have, or you expect a parent to have blinders on about how good their kid is. The real evil's coming out of the people who are making $200,000 a year off of youth hockey, right? Like that's not necessary. They're not making it better. If you're making a bunch of money, but the product that you're working on is being improved and it's a better product, then be compensated. But they're actually making it worse.
And hopefully it'll change, but it seems like hockey is has been growing in the south suburbs. I didn't grow up playing hockey, but it seems that it's always just growing thing. And then hopefully with Chicago, winning some more hockey games here in the next season with some new blood in there, and maybe we'll inspire some growth in the youth hockey program. You made a comment, maybe not, I'm not going to quote word for word because I don't remember it, but you had made a comment that some of your best memories of youth hockey was in the high school years, right?
Yeah.
And so it's about those connections, right, and the fun activities. And can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I think, obviously my son's in that situation where they're playing club and where do you go for high school, right? And so what are some of your thoughts and memories on that?
Let me think about how I used to view it back then, right? So, we're talking about double rostering, right? So we have the best of both worlds, which is being robbed from, it exists, right? It's a coach's decision. It's not a league mandate or a high mandate. So I know that there's kids on the Jets that are double rostering with Maris, for example. Good for them. That's great. I think club might have been a little bit more consistent. Whereas if you're playing one of the bottom teams, it may have been a little bit higher than the bottom teams in high school, if I could remember right. Close to something like that, it felt like maybe a little bit more consistency within the league of clubs, competition-wise, right? Okay, but how meaningful is that? Because when you're with a good high school, playing a good high school, it's just as good. It was the same players. It was the same hockey players. Like we had a rivalry against the Northwest Chargers every year, that cluster of kids who are still friends with and still come out to my golf outing. Joey Colesant and Sean Barrett and Buddy Wallace and all these great hockey players who went on to play Division I hockey. They also played for Fremd. Right? So we'd play them, Jude against the Chargers for state, and then the next night we're playing them in the state semifinals for high school, Fremd against Carmel. That actually happened. It was wild. But those high school games were so much more rowdy. And then when you look up in the stands for Kennedy Cup Championship, and you've got thousands of screaming kids from not only the two high schools involved, but the other high schools surrounding the area, it was just a totally different event. Because, let's face it, club hockey, who's in the stands? Mom, dad, maybe some kid's got a girlfriend. That's it. A couple of little brothers, playing shinny in the lobby. That's it. But high school was completely different because now you've got hundreds of kids chanting the opposing goalie's last name, and scuffles in the parking lot, and I could tell you all kinds of stories from back in the day.
Well, at least it was a lot of fun, and obviously the connections, right? You're still, and we'll get to the golf outing here in a moment. But obviously you went on to play juniors, and then you end up playing for ISU, which just awarded you Hall of Fame for that era that was there. Fun. Yeah, and so talk about a little bit of your college years when you finally got there.
Yeah, well, I mean, backing up because you just mentioned the network.
Yeah.
Like here's the cold hard truth. Like, and I realized later like how much sacrifice my parents made, time wise, financially. Right? Again, like my dad was a cop and my mom didn't work, and I remember you had to go through 4 tolls if you're going to take the tollway from Beverly to Glenview. 4 tolls, and back then they were 30 cents a piece. 30, 60, 90, 120, and then double that for the way home, $2.40. There were times that we couldn't take the toll road because we didn't have that money.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's kind of, you get a little emotional thinking about it because I didn't realize anything like that. I was like, what the hell? You don't have a couple of bucks? But that was a big deal. And then I realized later, much later, that what the investment is, and it's the same investment that we're giving to our kids right now. Listen, if somebody breaks through and goes and gets college paid for, that's phenomenal. If 1 or 2 kids out of everybody that we know of actually play a few games in the NHL, that's phenomenal, right? The potential of somebody actually getting a career out of the NHL, like it's a possibility, but it ain't gonna happen very much. The reality is the investment goes towards the network, right? Like I can't tell you how many jobs I've gotten, how many meetings people have taken, me being in sales, how many meetings people have taken because they're part of the hockey community. My first, big kid job, my first real job was Career Builder. I was coaching the CMO's son. He said, why don't you come over to Career Builder, And from there, it's happened, multiple times. But just being a part of that hockey community, like, opens doors. It really, really does. And aside from that, the number of, so we talk about the South Side, right? Like everybody, by the time I was, in high school, all my friends on the South Side, they knew everybody in the South Side because everybody in the South Side knows everybody from the South Side. That's fantastic. But I had all of these friends in, on the North Side, and Glenview and Edison and Hinsdale and, and it was because of hockey. And the connection is so deep, especially anybody that I was ever on a team with. There's something that is permanent. Right? Like you were in the trenches together when you were a peewee, when you were 11. And it sounds weird, right, probably to anybody listening to this, sure, but go back to the golf outing. Like there's people there that haven't seen each other in 25 years and they literally just pick up right where they left off. And it's not on a, weird, awkward level. It's on a, holy shit, do you remember when me and you were, doing this thing at this tournament in, Detroit or whatever that it was? And that is the value, but no, we don't know it now. The parents don't know it now. You realize it later that, I'm lucky enough to know people not just all over Chicagoland and then be one person removed from anybody you meet. Right? Like, hey, how you doing? Where are you from? Palatine. Oh, then you must know so-and-so, and that always, helps in social situations, but then it becomes national too. So now this, whether it's people in Cleveland, Detroit, Minnesota, Boston, whatever, you're one person removed from, all of these places too. And it's just turned into really neat and the source of, where the source of knowing, it's the expansion of the community, right? Like there's a huge difference between being a part of this hockey community and not being a part of it. And the difference is literally, hundreds, if not thousands of connections, and they're meaningful connections, right? Like that's the difference between baseball and basketball and football. Everybody plays baseball. Everybody plays basketball. So it's so big that it's really not a club, there's really no barrier to entry. Where in hockey, it's still big, but it's just small enough where it's almost unique to bump into somebody randomly, who's a hockey player. So when you do that, let's just say that you're, I don't know, at a resort in Mexico, I don't know, whatever it is, and you pull up to the bar and, somebody talks about hockey, there's an instant connection there. Or if it's 2 basketball players, they might talk about the NBA for a minute, but everybody's in that club. And this one it's just small enough that there are certain barriers to entry, and then there's a couple of qualifying questions.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
There's always a couple of qualifying. Okay, you're a hockey person. At what level are we talking here? And I don't mean playing level. I just mean like, how invested are you? Sure. And then once you kind of vet that out, all of a sudden there's a connection where it's almost like you go way back with this person. It's really unique.
And I could voice that as well. I grew up in the scuba world, and so a lot of hockey players that might be listening to this, I was in the scuba side, started young, and thousands of dives, met many people all over the globe, and even just like you said, like one person removed. I was probably not one person removed. It was probably two or three from some of the world leaders of scuba at one point, right? And so, but when you meet somebody with scuba, it's like your basketball story, right? You're like, oh, where have you gone, this and that, and all of a sudden it fizzles out at some point, but it's cool to have a connection, right? Yes. But even, I've never played the game until now because of my boys' play, and then being involved in hockey so much. Since that's all occurred, that hockey connection has definitely been a lot stronger than the scuba. You would show up it could be a random meeting, like completely unplanned coffee. It could be a coffee shop, right? Like you said, at the bar in Mexico. But it could also be a business meeting, and all of a sudden, somehow, some way, hockey comes up, and they're like, "Oh, you know about hockey?" Like it's almost like this inside club. And they're like, I was at one meeting. It was up north. I don't remember. And this guy starts telling me, and his kid played high level of basketball, and so we were he got screwed by the national basketball place. I'm not going to mention it yet. Yeah. And so about health insurance. So he's like, I need a fix for this because he got screwed in many ways, and that's a whole nother topic. And so we put him on an insurance program, and all of a sudden hockey came up, and he goes, hey, come here. And he walks me down this hall, right? We're in a business office, and he walks down the hall, and I meet this guy. And he actually looked like it was like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and he looked like he just rolled in. And so we started talking. Well, he just rolled in because he had a beer league game, and he didn't get home until like 2 o'clock in the morning. I sat in his office for like the next 45 minutes, and all we did was talk about hockey and the connections, and we actually knew mutual people, and I never played the game. And so that's how connected the hockey world is, and the network. And sure, I probably financially benefit from some of those connections, but more so, it's the relationships. Like I could call some of those people now, and they like know me on a first name basis, even though we have no business connections, we have no other social involvement except for the word hockey.
Yeah, well, and it translates too, because like being in sales for all of these years, you have to go. Figure out, you have to go farm your leads, right? So one of the tools that I spend probably the most time on is LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And then you do a LinkedIn search, what kind of companies you're looking for, what kind of job titles you're looking for. And then I go ahead and I'll keyword hockey. Mm-hmm. And a LinkedIn search, right? So if I find somebody, if I'm looking, let's just say, who am I calling on? I don't know, Kraft, right? And somebody in marketing at Kraft, right? So now that's two keywords. Somebody in marketing at Kraft who has hockey anywhere in their LinkedIn page, boom, home run.
Yes.
Right?
It's a big connection, yeah.
So now I'm reaching out with a little bit of relevance. Who at Kraft in marketing at 10:30 a.m. on a Tuesday is, wants to reply to some lowly sales guy who's a dime a dozen versus, oh, this dude actually wants to talk about hockey for a minute?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I could use a little break.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just completely different and totally effective.
Totally. Yeah. And it's interesting you bring that because I've used LinkedIn searches and I put the word scuba because that's a background and connection of mine. But yeah, it's too broad, right? Like, and they're like, oh yeah, I went scuba diving in Mexico one time.
Yeah.
And then
all of a sudden, catching a lot of people who,
and then,
like me.
Yeah. Right.
Well, yeah, I know everything about scuba.
And then that's when you said you ask qualifying questions and you're like, oh, okay. But even in the hockey world, I'll ask a couple qualifying questions. And they're like, yeah, I used to play hockey. Oh, yeah? Yeah, where'd you play? And all this stuff. And I find out that they quit hockey before age of 10. And you're like, I'm like, okay, all right, that's cool that you played, right? At least you were on do you still skate now? No, I haven't skated since then. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just kind of like, okay, it rolls out the conversation and the connection to a different avenue.
You put it in a different bucket.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Because some of those connections may come to fruition at some point too, but and then of course, as soon as they find out that you played hockey, they try to like, oh yeah, I played hockey, or my cousin played hockey, and then you find out after a couple qualifying questions that ends up going a different direction.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
Listen up, Butch wants to give you your own Elite Benefits Playbook, and it's absolutely free. From business strategy to benefits strategy, every step from the start through implementation, account setup, and open enrollment, working through service requests and the process of renewals. A valuable look at your company, your insurance options, and how to make the process easier on you. Go now to elitebenefits.net/playbook and get your free Elite Benefits Playbook, or give Butch a call today, 708-535-3006.
Yeah, so back to your stint at ISU with college hockey. So So when I left Carmel, I was lucky enough that I got drafted into the North American Hockey League. Lakeland Jets, now defunct. I don't know. They became Danville, and then they became something else. I don't know which franchise they are now. I was at a place where I was making some poor decisions. And then I was also becoming too cool. And you mix those things. And then all of a sudden I said, oh, hockey's stupid. Hockey's not important to me. What am I going to do here? I was seeing concerts and stuff like that. And I remember being at a Fish concert. I played the whole season, the first season, and then trying to contemplate whether I was going to go back to Detroit for the second year. And I decided that, I didn't agree with the coach and all these things that later it was like, what the hell were you doing? I was a kid who needed some guidance, apparently. But long and short of it is I was so that first semester of school, I wasn't doing anything. I was just, I didn't go back to Detroit, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to go to school. Where am I going to go to school? Okay, well, I got into Illinois State University. I'll go there. And I ran into a kid from Hinsdale who I had played a lot of hockey against at this Fish concert. I forget where it was. And Dougie's like, hey, Edison, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, yeah, nothing. I'm just going to go to ISU. I go to ISU. You going to play hockey? Oh, you guys got a hockey team? Sure. I'll play. You had no idea.
That's how it happened.
Yeah.
I was done with hockey, What did I move to? Nothing. Right? So, so we jump on in the middle of the season, and we ended up going to nationals. It was fantastic. A couple of years there, and I made some of my best buddies there. Again, a good handful of guys who, I still stay in touch with. And, one of my buddies, Matt Haller, we actually lost a couple of years back, but there was a group of us who still remain super close, like brothers. And it was a blessing because the Hall of Fame thing happened last weekend or the weekend before, and we all got together for the first time in a long time, and it was just awesome, man. It was like picking up right where you left off, but this time everybody was looked old and had gray hair.
Sure.
That's how I wound up at ISU as a 2-year run, and then I kind of grew up during that time, and cut my hair and said, I used to be pretty decent at this game. I'd hate to fast forward 10 years from now and think about, what could have been.
Right. Right.
So I was actually, my buddy Faraci, one of these guys from ISU, he's like, what the hell are you doing here? Get the hell out of here. Right. So I went to, spent the summer, instead of coming home on the south side, and kind of regrouping with, all of the people who had the same habits as I did. I went and spent the summer up in Brainerd, Minnesota at Minnesota hockey camps as a instructor, puck pusher for those guys, because that's the real deal. For example, like Joe Thornton had just been drafted.
Oh, wow.
And all of Mike Barnett's Gretzky's agent. Yeah. So all of his first 2 rounders had to go to Minnesota hockey camp and spend the summer there. And all of these, you look around and all of these real well-known hockey people. So it was the right place for me to be for all of those weeks, getting healthy and doing the right things. And then I went to a free agency camp in Mississauga. Got picked up by a team in the Western Pro League. First it was the Central Hockey League, Fort Worth Fire. And then to the Western Pro League, in Abilene Aviators. And not that I really made my mark or even these teams, but I got to spend a couple of seasons there, and 1.5. And because the team that I was with in Abilene ran out of money halfway through. So that was the end of it. Instead of moving on, what it gave me was the opportunity to say, holy shit, these guys are good. Mm-hmm. So when I arrived at Abilene, I never played a game. Of a 20-man roster, and didn't help that I was on a team that went 26-0 before they lost a game. Out of our 20-man roster, 13 guys had already scored a goal in the NHL.
Oh, wow.
Right. You got guys like Patrick Waugh's little brother, Stefan, who's a second-round draft pick. You had Charlie Poulin, who was, I think he was a first-round draft pick for the Montreal Canadiens. Might have been second round. You've got Eric Brule, whose first NHL goal was assisted by Trottier and Mario. The story goes on and on. But you get to a place where, I remember, we were in Texas, right? And it was an expansion team. And the ownership was big cowboy hat oil people, I still remember them coming to the locker room for the first game. He's like, I'll bring them out for the first game, but you want them to come back, they're going to need to be a lot of fighting. And we did. We had Alan May, who was like an all-time PIMS leader for the Washington Capitals. It was sick, the roster. But my point for bringing up the ownership is he had a big family, and they were awesome, and they were really warm, took care of us, and all these wonderful things. And then I'd be practicing with this team on a daily basis, and they'd come out, and I got to know them because, maybe I wasn't traveling with the team. So when the team's gone, I'm like at their ranch, so they get to know the ownership, and they'd come to practice and say, what the hell? It doesn't make sense. Why aren't you playing? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, you look good. I'm like, the point is that, like, might look good to the naked eye, but me and everybody else on the ice, everybody clearly understands the pecking order.
Yeah, sure.
I'm out there wrecking drills.
Yes.
You get to a point where as this pyramid goes up and up and up, you get to a place where it's just like, these guys are so freaking good. Like a good hockey player, I could do back then. I could do the things that they do, but I need an extra second. I need more time. I need more space to do it. I need more tries to do it. Where these people are just getting pucks and just snapping them around 10 out of 10 times and picking the corner. It's just a different level. But it's hard to see because it's minute. It's really a small difference. But when that small difference becomes consistent and it happens every single time, then it becomes huge. Mm-hmm. And that gave me the peace of mind. Like, okay, I'm going home. I'm going to resume my life for the sole reason that I am just not good enough. Yeah. So that's when I went back to school and I graduated.
Was it hard? Was it hard to make that decision though? Was it like
the decision was made for you?
Oh, sure. Oh, okay. But did you feel crushed at the time, or was it kind of just the rite of passage, kind of just the way you knew it was coming, the writing was on the wall?
Yeah, I can't say that I was crushed. I mean, a different outcome would have been preferred for sure. But it wasn't crushed. It was just like, hey, now you're certain. Now you know. So, back when you were, 16 and 17 and you thought you were a big shot. Yeah. Well, big shot, little pond.
Yes.
Big pond, not a big shot. Yeah. It's just, it's more than anything, I would just say it increased my respect for the people who do it, because you watch an NHL game right now. It's almost like if you're watching an NHL game versus like a junior A game, or even a college game, these guys in college and junior A, they just pumping. They're just back checking so hard. You can see how hard they're skating junior A. Every shift, they're trying to, make a team or just make a difference. And every shift is so meaningful. And you see all the work, all the hard work and all the extra effort. And then you turn on an NHL game and it just looks smoother and easier. They're not working any less, they're just better. So, I got to work harder at the lower levels because the pass wasn't right on my tape, there's more scratching and clawing. Where these guys at the NHL, every pass is right on the tape. Just look for that. Break it down. Just look like, where are these passes? Anybody passing into anybody's skates? Is anybody passing on somebody's backhand when they should have passed it on their forehand? Like all of these little finite things that you might not notice until you know what you're looking for or until you take the time to look for them. It makes the difference, and it just makes it look like it's really easy. It is not. They're just that freaking good, you know?
Yeah, it's a good point. And you pointed out coaching some of the kids have purpose, right? And putting in tape to tape is definitely a purpose, right?
We're working on the power play, and before you guys I'm just having them work the perimeter. But every pass, like if you've got pressure and you put a pass that's not on somebody's tape, all right, I might be a little bit more lenient on you. If there's no pressure on you and you don't put it on the player's tape, it's a bad play. It's a dumb play, and it's because you weren't focused. Right? Because you can put the puck at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. You can put the puck anywhere you want. So when you don't do it, it's because you're not focused. Right? So, we were talking about that last night. Have purpose with everything that you do, you know? And when you put the puck on somebody's stick, you've just bought your teammate an extra half a second. You know, because if I have to look down and get this puck where I want it and kick it up to myself, boom, that's an extra half a second. And in a game where there's nothing more important than creating time and space, like that's meaningful because that extra half a second, now I'm forced to make a decision quicker. So it's less likely that it's going to be the right decision.
And definitely with purpose, which leads into one of the other topics I want to talk about, and just fast forward in life to more current, but you created a company that you have a passion for products, but it has a purpose, right? There's a hidden, not even hidden, right? You make it very well known that there's a purpose behind this company. Can you give us a little background on how you came up with Toe Drag, maybe a little bit about the socks, and then the purpose behind it all?
Yeah. So Toe Drag apparel. This how we came up with it is. The effects of probably burning out at work and driving home in traffic on a Friday afternoon, asking myself, what did I do today? And when the answer was I convinced 1 million people to go order Pizza Hut, I said, what am I doing? I think I always wanted to start my own company and operate my own company. I think that I'm one of those guys who wasn't smart enough to just do it right out of the gate. I needed to gain some experience before that was going to happen. And then, at some point you start rolling into, maybe some bosses who you're just, there's a place where you start your career, you're learning every day, and everybody in your company who's been there longer than you're learning from in every conversation. And then you get to a piece where it's like, you're rolling up to people who are like, really? That's your answer? Like, there's other ways to do this, right? So you kind of, it's natural, right? And with experience and if you're learning the game, you get to that point, and then it becomes less exciting because part of the excitement is learning every day, right? And doing new things. I started to experience burnout. I pulled my car over on the side of the road. I Googled, how do you make a sock?
Wow.
Yeah.
It seems random. So what was the idea? How did you come up with socks?
Well, I just figured that I thought I was going to start a socks company. So this is back when everybody was still wearing suits and ties to work. And you're wearing your suit and tie, your monkey suit. And I identified socks as the last place where people could express their, originality, their character, right? Is people started wearing these funky socks. And granted, it was people in their 20s and 30s only. But as those people got older now, then all of a sudden, because everybody used to wear black socks or brown socks or white socks. And then when the guys in their 20s are wearing these funky socks, the guys in their 30s and 40s are still wearing the black socks and the brown socks. And slowly you saw that age climb. Do you know anybody who wears white socks and brown socks and black socks exclusively anymore? No, like those days are gone. And once you transition into the funky socks, the one thing I know is you ain't going back. Right? Yeah. You're not going back. Like you're in for keeps. So I figured that I was going to be starting a adult socks brand, and it was going to be hockey. And I wasn't opposed to breaking into other communities, but it was going to be just like what we talked about, right? Like if I'm in a job interview and I'm in my monkey suit and the guy, holding the job sees my funky hockey socks and says, "Are you a hockey player?" Like, yeah. So, like, you identify other people in your tribe through the socks, right? And it could be scuba diving socks, and it could be, even soccer socks or whatever it is. Since then, I've had requests for all kinds of different socks, like the linemen, the guys who work up on the heavy electric lines. Like, hey, can you make here's our international linesman logo. Can you turn this into a sock? Like, they've got their own club, So that's kind of what the original idea was. And I came back with, when I Googled how do you make a sock, the response was, first you need a graphic designer. I said, shit, okay. Yeah. So I Googled graphic designers near me. And I get all these results back. And here's an interesting thing. I must have left 12 voicemails. This is on a Friday afternoon. And out of those 12 voicemails, only one person got back to me. Her name's Vicky, and she still gets all of my graphic design work right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I was like, really?
Right.
So we're in this business world, and everybody's complaining about, I need more business. I left 12 voicemails and got one call back. With Vicky's help, we made 4 or 5 different samples. And the shinny skin socks, what we went with, right, the sock that exists today, I was like, this is horrible. Like, this is by far the ugliest of all these socks. And because all these other socks were like, they're actually going to work with adults. Right. Maybe, in my mind. Right. And then you get this one sock that looks like a cartoon skate, and it was Vicky. She's like, are you nuts? She's like, she holds it up. She's like, this is your entire business. Yeah. I'm like, I don't see it. Yeah. I don't know. But then that was I forget which team. Were we coaching together at this point when I gifted them to the team at the end of the season, like the very first batch that ever existed?
Maybe not. Well, you've gifted several, so I don't know if it was the first batch or not.
But all of a sudden, these kids are like wearing them. Like, I gave them away yesterday, and they wear them the next day, and then the next day, and the next day. I'm like, maybe Vicky's onto something.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So then I went down to a club I used to coach at, the Hawks, and I made their shinny skids, and it was the same feedback, right? Like, I got a complaint. The first complaint that I had from a mom, and she said, you know what? There's a hole in Travis's sock. I'm like, oh, shit, sorry. Here, I'm going to give you another pair. I'm like, how long's he had them? It's like, he's had them a year, and he wears them every day.
Like, all right. 365 uses.
Wise ass. Right. Here you go. So it were kind of a hit. And then we did the Vikings, a run of them, and had the same feedback early on. And then I was like, okay, maybe this is something. And next thing you know, we shipped to 24 different countries. And the mission is, like you said, it's the Chicago Diabetes Project. Toe drag is really, the whole basis of it is just a platform to do stuff for, in the guise of hockey, right? But for the Chicago Diabetes Project. And it hasn't grown yet into what I want it to continue to grow so that I could give more to CDP, right? So there's 2 facets to it. That's the underlying truth and reason. But at the same time, like, it is really cool to just have something where it's like, I just got an idea for a new hockey product. Oh, let's go make it. Right. Like, I'm not talking about gear and equipment and stuff like that. You got a golf shirt anything now. Apparel. Yeah. Let's go make it. Yeah. I know where to go. I know, what factory does this, what factory does that, and I have relationships there, and we kick out stuff all the time, and it's just fun. And then we get calls from, all over the country, like, because they don't know that we're little.
Yeah, right.
You give the impression that you want to some people. And but there's some truth to it too. We just did game jerseys for multiple teams in the Federal Hockey League. That's a pro hockey league, right? We got the contract for this new Northeastern Hockey League, this is going to be their inaugural season. So we have definitely the ability to take care of all these people, but it's really neat when you get a call from, Minnesota or New Hampshire saying, hey, you guys, I saw you guys on Instagram and we need jerseys. Sure, let's go. We'll take care of you for certain. Yeah. So it's just slowly but surely growing. Haven't really sunk a lot of ad dollars into it. I'd like to at some point. But like I said, like the 2 times that I tried to go full time with it, it's like there's a difference between, having a job and toe drag feeling like it's doing well. Right. There's a difference in that and than moving and using every profit to feed the family,
Right.
as opposed to putting it back into the company. It kind of stunts the growth, right?
Sure,
like operating capital, it turns out that it's pretty important.
Sure. Yeah.
So
but Toe Drag has that purpose, though. I mean, part of it is just the give back to Chicago Diabetes Project.
That's it. It's a platform to do that, and I've made some really, really awesome connections and relationships too. And I mean, look at Dunks, for example. Dunks, who lives and breathes Toe Drag with me. My partner on it, him, and he's unbelievable. And I would never have known him if it wasn't for Toe Drag. It's just another friendship, and it's just expands that network and creates more and more opportunity, and hopefully we'll take that opportunity and kind of put it back to center and be able to lift up Chicago Diabetes Project more and more over time as we grow. And then CDP, the things that they're doing simultaneously, just unbelievable headway. Just inches, put it this way, red tape away from the cure to type 1 diabetes. It's just incentivizes me more and more to be like, okay, this is the right horse to bet on to, help my son and all these other hockey players. Not only my son Matthew, but to have 2 more type 1s on our team for the, crazy coincidence, I had the Dexcom with 3 different kids.
Yes.
Numbers, so any opposing parents are like, this coach is an asshole. He's just looking at his phone the whole game.
And all you're looking at is numbers.
I'm looking at blood sugar.
Yeah, for sure. And, that's obviously in the hockey world, it's pretty big. There's even another group that puts the hockey players on the ice. All the type 1, you can only get in if you're a type 1, and they have this big camp down in Florida, and I think that's fantastic because now you're taking kids that are growing up and dealing with this and put them in a room and say, I'm dealing with it. Yeah. And so, but part of the, Toe Drag's helping putting money towards Chicago Diabetes Project. And then every year you run a golf outing.
That's kind of where we get to make a little contribution. The awareness is terrific. And then the golf outing creates a little bit of money. And it's just, so I think this was going to be our 9th annual. I don't know. It certainly started small, maybe a dozen people. Sure. But it is, it's terrific because maybe 100 hockey players or hockey coaches or just people from the hockey community and, and wives, and we get a lot of women out there. But it's another perfect example of, I've tried over time, we've moved the course around a little bit, but it really needs to be halfway because it's not just the South Side hockey players that we know and see. It's the people coming down from, the northern suburbs too, that we used to know and see, and it's so, there's nothing cooler than seeing, a couple of people who reconnect over a beer, haven't seen each other, like I said, since Pee-wees or Bantams,
sure,
and pick up right where they left off and have the entire day ahead of them to golf in the sun with, cold beers, good food, and just shooting the breeze. It's really such a good day. And it's grown year over year. Always looking for more and more sponsors. I've got a vision for this thing, which I don't even know if I should share it because it puts me at risk in case it never really happens. But the vision starts with nuts to bolts. At one of these years, as we kick off, which is a great moment for the outing. And this year everybody had their little airplane bottle of Pink Whitney. As everybody's toasting that, one of these years, a limo is going to pull up behind all the golf carts, and Jim Cornelison's going to come out and kick us off properly.
Well, maybe he'll hear this and get the message, right?
Yeah. We're working on it.
Yeah. And now we may not have this edited and produced in time, but you're part of a fundraising event. You're running the Chicago Marathon.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the big question is, are you ready for it?
No, of course not. Absolutely not. Am I ready for a marathon? I've been training for it. Yeah, training itself is difficult. We'll see how this goes. I don't intend to quit. The goal is to finish.
Yes. And is it this weekend or next weekend?
It's this Sunday.
Yeah, this Sunday.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a long run later today, and then probably shut it down for tomorrow and Saturday. And then off we go. The furthest I've ever run, I know that I've done a few 10 miles down at Soldier Field, but I feel like I did a 13 at some point. But even at 13, you're only halfway home.
You'll make it through it, and obviously you're running it to raise money for the Chicago Diabetes Project. So there's your purpose for sure. But and everybody's got a wall. Hopefully it's not 13 miles. Hopefully it's a little closer to 20, because then it gives you a little hope and inspiration. You're almost at 26.
Yeah. We'll see how this goes. I'm a little nervous about it, but it's as long as I don't die. It'll be good. And if I finish, it'll be great. That's the plan. I shouldn't say if. I'm not thinking that way. I'm thinking that I'm going to finish it. But that would be, that would be 2 wins.
Yeah, for sure. I never got to run it. Obviously, I used to be a runner.
Easy for you. You can knock it out this afternoon.
I don't know. Maybe I've been a little out of the swing, but 50 miles, I guess, is double that. But I was going to do it one year. It was the year of COVID. Raise some money for the Chicago Diabetes Project, and then they shut it down.
I remember that.
Yeah, and never got out there to do it, but maybe one day. But I guess I've heard that the Chicago Marathon has 8 stations like every mile, and I think that's great, and I think that'll help keep you motivated. Whereas when I did the 50 miles, every 6 to 7 miles.
Oh man,
yeah.
So if something goes haywire, you are on your own.
Yeah, for sure. But one thing, because I've also not finished the 50 mile, I finished and not finished, and so as long as you keep moving, it just eventually it's going to come to an end, right? And so at least that's the theory. And I think the path and the map that I was looking at from that year that I was going to do it, it's a good map, and I think it's all flat, and so I wish you a lot of success with it, and then obviously the fundraising behind it too, and keep the purpose up. I think it's a lot of good things, but we'll definitely get you back on. We'll get a recap of the Chicago Marathon, and but I know Dan, you're headed another direction where you do a whole bunch of things, but we'll get you back on to actually talk about your new venture that you're going into and see if we could dive into that, because there's a lot of crossover with what we do in my industry, and so there would be a lot of synergy, so we'll get you back on there for that. But hey, thanks for coming out to the show, and we'll get you back.
All right, I look forward to it. Butcher, thanks for having me, my friend.